Hey guys, Noel here, and it is Thursday night. Before I go to bed, I thought it'd be fun for us to do a weblog for the video game section of the YouTube channel, and the topic of tonight's weblog is going to be the Atari VCS. Now, it looks like the Atari VCS will in fact be coming out, maybe not to full-blown retail, but the people who backed their Indiegogo campaign in January, and I think that's interesting and good, and I think that if this works, we might be able to get some diversity in the video game marketplace, and that would be nice to see Atari's legacy in hardware continue. That said, I'm also highly skeptical that it will still in fact come out. I'm kind of the I'll see it when I believe it category on the Atari VCS, because I think that it's incredibly difficult for whatever Atari is now, which appears to be a handful of people with backgrounds in public relations who bought the patent to the Atari name. It's going to be difficult for them to actually produce video game hardware. It looks like they are going to release a Atari branded TV PC in the form of in the shape of a video game console, so it will have the look and feel of a video game console, while in fact being a kind of a generic Atari branded computer with, I guess, the potential for some kind of quote-unquote proprietary software for it, and it's very overpriced. Now, there is, I think, some method to Atari's madness. I think they're basically following the Beats headphone model and the Apple model, and that is basically to produce a subpar product, jack up the price, and have people pay for name recognition. And that's, I think, really what Atari is banking on, because they're able to say, hey, we're Atari. We know what we're doing. Remember Atari? Well, we're back, and we're back in a big way with this new console. And even though it would lack actual substance, I think they're, compared to something like the Xbox One or the PlayStation 4, the Nintendo Switch, which do have like proprietary technology and exclusive titles and brand recognition. Atari has brand recognition, and I think that they're hoping that that's going to be enough. That hype is going to be enough to float them through and try to get enough traction to continue to have this thing develop. The model of the Atari VCSs seem to have been, have people hope that people will pay a lot of money for the brand name, and then once you get said money, see where the chips will fall. And if this thing can get successful enough and get enough money backing it, that can then potentially open up opportunities for more things on the console, because Atari, as it stands now, is not anything on par with Nintendo or Sony or Microsoft or Sega. They're, again, I think, a handful of people in a publicly traded company that does have millions of dollars at its disposal, but is got nowhere near the infrastructure or funding of these, entrenched, multi-billion-dollar gaming companies. Now, some people will say, hey, don't support this thing because this isn't really Atari. The Atari that you know and love, from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, that hasn't existed for decades. And my response to that is that I don't really buy that. Yes, the people running this Atari are not like Nolan Bushnell and all the people that you see in video game historian YouTube videos. So yeah, obviously those guys aren't running Atari, but unless like Nolan Bushnell and the rest of the crew come back and create some kind of alternative and say, we're the real legacy of Atari, whatever has got the Atari name on it, that's what Atari has become. So So, as far as I'm concerned, this is new Atari hardware, and that is why people want to support it and have it succeed. Now, there's a lot of people that don't want to see this succeed, and that's a lot of the people on YouTube, like, Review Tech USA, Pat the NES Punk, and Ian. These are people that I think have been, even Dreamcast guy, who I like, and I like all of the people I just named, because I think their content is interesting and relaxing to listen to for the most part, but they've been really, I think, pessimistic about this console. And so when this, Atari, in the form of a PR firm, lashes out at them and calls them haters, I think that's accurate, because for whatever reason, when these new retro consoles come out, they're rightly viewed with suspicion, which is good, but they're also, I think, not being viewed by these YouTube commentators as actual fans. There are these people that want to think that they have, that they're quote unquote journalists. And journalists in our culture are people who are within the orbit of the elite class of which they cover. And so I think when people will say, well, who is this for? What is this console for? Where does it fit into the market? To me, that comes off more as a lot of jargon. I mean, it might be a legitimate question, but I'll tell you, I can answer that question right now. I'll tell you who it's for. It's for people who like video games. It's people who like the Atari name. It's for people who want to have more hardware. It's for people who like new hardware. And it's for people that want to see the Atari legacy and the Atari Geist, that spirit, that mystique of this past legendary game company just returned with new hardware. It's the same appeal as the at-game Sega Genesis is. Now, I didn't grow up so much with the Atari 2600, but I did grow up with the Sega Genesis, and I buy at-games Sega Genesis consoles just because I like buying new Sega hardware. I know that the sound on them is often really bad. I just like seeing Sonic on new Sega hardware, and I will buy it because I like Sega Genesis, and this plays Sega Genesis games, and if it's at, Rite Aid for $20, why not? Now, here's the downside to what Atari's trying to do. The price was always right with the at-games stuff, but if at-games was actually charging an exorbitant price for their stuff, then I might be kind of I like the idea of buying a Sega Genesis in a drugstore, but I don't like the idea of paying hundreds of dollars for it. And that really is what Atari is doing there. If you take a look at the pricing of the Atari VCS, I'm not buying it. I don't think, there's nothing on it of real interest to me. There's literally nothing on it. There's no software for this thing. Because it's just a computer. And their whole thing's in our sandbox mode, which is essentially just saying, well, in our Linux browser mode, you can do anything. You can go on the internet and get anything you want. It's yeah, I know. And people will say you can just do this on a computer. It's I know you can do it on a computer, but people like the idea that it's an Atari branded computer. That is the selling point. The selling point is the name and the mystique and the memory. And that's not just nostalgia. It's people hoping that something new and exciting will happen with a familiar, beloved brand with a lot of credibility that is being wielded by people with no credibility. So that's the situation. So in conclusion, I think that the Atari VCS is overpriced and doesn't have a lot of substance, but nevertheless, I think it's exciting that it's coming out. I would like it to gain substance and succeed, and I like listening to these YouTube commentators' takes on the Atari VCS, but I think ultimately those takes are being tinged by elitism and toxicity. So there you have it, guys. I'm going to go to bed because I have to teach tomorrow. And until next time, guys, my name is Noel. Please like and subscribe to my channel so it can continue to grow. And until next time, I'll see you. Bye-bye.